Even though legs originally might have benefited snakes, a serpent now propels itself in an S-shaped motion.
The soil, we can't even define exactly what is dry.
Wouldn't it be interesting if modern science can actually reinforce the biblical view of our importance to God and maybe challenge the atheist materialist viewpoint?
Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up on tonight's show, we'll reconsider what Genesis means by dry land. Dr. Glenn Wilson, a soil physicist and hydrologist, explores how the biblical language may point to a humid, life-ready earth rather than a barren one, which could reshape how we picture day 3 of creation. Later, we'll explore a big question. If the universe is so vast, how can God still care about us? Former JPL team lead David Coppage offers a biblical perspective that reminds us size doesn't always determine significance. But first, when we consider the argument for evolution, one of its fundamental tenets revolves around the concept of adaptation. As Darwin famously emphasized, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent species that survives, but rather the one most capable of adjusting to change. However, while the theory of evolution suggests millions of years of change, we turn our attention to the incredible miracle of designed adaptation, or I might call it divine engineering. I'm referring to that remarkable ability of our human body to respond and adapt, a testament to its intricate design by a creator. Specifically, let's examine how our bodies adapt in space. Recently, the Crew 9 astronauts were safely brought home by SpaceX. What was intended to be a brief 8-day mission extended into an enduring 9.5-month stay in outer space. Articles, including one from Live Science titled NASA astronauts Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore were carried away on stretchers after return from space. Here's why that's normal, delves into the biological changes that occur in a weightless environment. Much like a leg amputee relearning to walk with a prosthetic limb or a stroke survivor recovering their ability to speak, astronauts, they must readjust and regain their equilibrium upon returning to Earth. Following extended periods in space, many astronauts require assistance to adapt to gravity again due to the significant adaptations that their bodies undergo in weightlessness, which can lead to dizziness and nausea upon re-entry. The vestibular system, responsible for maintaining our balance, becomes accustomed to the absence of gravity, making the transition back to Earth's gravitational pull particularly challenging. Astronauts may experience space motion sickness during this adjustment phase. But more than that, prolonged exposure to microgravity results in muscle and bone loss due to reduced physical activity. That causes muscle atrophy and decreased bone density. So just as the effects of regular exercise and a nutritious diet can be visibly evident in a person's physique, the impact of microgravity is profound. Our bodies are marvelously designed to respond to external forces, especially during physical activity. Engaging in workouts leads to micro tears in our muscles, prompting repair and strengthening through a process that consistent exercise enhances this cardiovascular efficiency, improving blood flow and oxygen delivery. Hormonal responses such as increased endorphin levels elevate mood and resilience. And over time, these adaptations, they lead to improved strength, endurance, and overall physical performance, showcasing our body's remarkable ability to confront challenges. But in space, astronauts must exercise daily and engage in rigorous daily training using specialized equipment aboard the International Space Station, the ISS, to counteract the inevitable muscle and bone loss. Even then, it still doesn't fully do what our bodies are designed to do. They work really hard at it. And this regimen is essential to ensure that astronauts remain physically fit for their return to Earth. Astronauts like Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore, who spent 9 months in space, diligently follow these protocols. I have friends who are astronauts that spent a staggering amount of time on the ISS, and they had to constantly be aware of this battle against the breakdown of their bodies in space. In fact, astronauts experience an average bone loss of about 1 to 2% per month, which can weaken their skeletal structure, while muscle atrophy can result in a loss of approximately 20 to 30% of muscle mass during long-duration missions. particularly affecting the legs and the back. Additionally, astronauts may face changes in fluid distribution, decreased cardiovascular function, alterations in vision, and that just underscores the profound effects of microgravity on the human body. But despite these challenges, experts still emphasize that astronauts do their utmost to remain well prepared physiologically for their return, minimizing the risk of significant health issues. Ongoing research continues to explore the long-term effects of space travel on the human body, but ultimately, we're designed to adapt and endure. As many biblical passages encourage us to persevere, to exhibit patience, or to overcome trials and run our race, we are reminded of our innate capacity to thrive, even in the most challenging environments. There's no doubt that there is no place like home, and yet we strive to explore the harshest places and learn more about God's creation. And I think that's pretty terrific. And that's when we can use real science to benefit us. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Just outside Nashville, the Wonder Center and Science Museum, with a top 10 planetarium, kids' hands-on activities, the teen favorite 1 million volt musical Tesla show. It's worlds of fun for the entire family. Experience the wonder. Explore the science. Inspire curiosity. Embark on adventure. The Wonder Center and Science Museum. Is there a biblical view of animal rights?
We've actually got a report that was in one of our British newspapers a little while back. Don't kill mosquitoes, let them take blood donation. Now here's a great example of being futile in your thinking, right?
Right.
At what point should we be looking after animals? At what point should we be treating animals as if they were humans? So it's a really popular topic.
On Wonders Without Number. I want to thank you for supporting GSN this year. Your support is helping us send this broadcast to millions of households around the globe. You know, in a society where the theories of Darwinian evolution are bombarding our youth via schools and universities and through peer pressure, we need to saturate the airwaves with the truth of real biblical science, and you are making this happen. Your one-time, monthly, or generous end-of-year tax-deductible love gift keeps this network streaming 24/7 at no cost to our viewers. Thank you for your support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. You know, some people have said that you can't trust the Bible as real history because archaeologically we just simply don't find evidence for the characters written about in here.
We're going to delve into the world of biblical archaeology. Biblical archaeology is all of archaeology, because archaeology is the study of humans.
Right.
So biblical archaeology is the study of human beings from a biblical perspective.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. It is time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. This week's submission comes from Jason, who says, I noticed in Genesis it never actually says that the serpent had legs before the curse, just that God cursed it to crawl on its belly. So does that mean it was actually a lizard at first, or was it some other kind of creature? Thank you for the question, Jason. Even though a snake is a serpent, the term serpent historically did have a much broader meaning. Serpents have also been related to dragons in portions of the Bible, and dragon and dinosaur depictions typically have legs. So what if it wasn't exactly the snakes we have today? We have no idea. Let's say it was a classical snake just with legs. That still would work anatomically, because even though legs originally might have benefited snakes, a serpent now propels itself in an S-shaped motion, which helps it to function without legs. So it could have been. And lastly, to your point, Jason, we have to remember that the Bible does not directly say that the serpent in the garden had legs. It just seems to imply it by saying that whatever the creature was, it would be forced to crawl on its belly for the rest of its existence. So this means that we don't know exactly what it looked like. One way or the other, the snake of today has gotten kind of a bad rap because of one deceiver in the beginning. But snakes in general actually do a lot of good for our surroundings. They keep the rodent population down. They make for fascinating creatures to study. And occasionally we have them here at the Wonder Center. No, not passing them around in the auditorium, but actually letting children interact with all of these different lizards and snakes and all sorts of creatures and learn from their design. Now, we love connecting with our viewers, so remember to keep these questions coming. You can share them with us on social media, or you can email comments at GenesisScienceNetwork.com. Now, if you've ever wrestled with questions about the origin of evil, the nature of Satan, or what really happened in the Garden of Eden, then you're going to want to take a closer look at this week's featured resource, Satan and the Serpent, a biblical view of Satan and evil. This compact yet powerful little guide delves into some of the most profound questions in both theology and culture, including, well, who is Satan? When was he created? When did he fall? Was Satan the serpent in the Garden of Eden? What about the other fallen angels? In a world that increasingly denies the reality of spiritual warfare, sin, and even sometimes saying, oh, well, Satan himself doesn't even exist, this book sets the record straight by going directly to the source, Scripture, and unpacks what the Bible actually says about the enemy of our souls and how the first few chapters of Genesis set the stage for the cosmic conflict between good and evil. But you know, this isn't just a study in darkness. The final pages point directly to the light of the gospel. Satan and the serpent doesn't just tell us the bad news of mankind's fall, it reminds us of the good news found in Jesus Christ. Through his life, death, and resurrection, the curse of sin has been broken and the power of evil has been decisively defeated. Whether you're studying Genesis or deepening your theology or just looking for a way to explain the biblical view of evil to others, this resource is a valuable tool. It's a nice short read for any believer, and you can find your copy by visiting the Creation Superstore at creationsuperstore.com. All right, have you ever walked along a beach or lakeshore and you picked up shells? Well, you've probably found shells that look something like this, and these are shell halves that remain after the creature has died. But when alive, a clam has two halves that they can tightly seal against any danger. So if you find a clam with both halves tightly sealed, well, you've probably found a live clam. So along the back edge of the shell back here is a very strong muscle that makes it really difficult to open the clam up when it's alive. All right. But when the clam dies, that muscle relaxes and the two shell halves open and eventually they separate. So clam shell halves and pieces are a really common find all over the beach scattered, but you probably aren't going to find too many that are whole and tightly sealed together if there's not still a living clam inside of it. But in the fossil record, you will often find clams that are tightly sealed, just like this one. And in some locations, these tightly sealed clam fossils can be found in the thousands. So since clamshell halves and pieces tell us that they are from a dead clam, what do tightly sealed fossil clams tell us? Well, that's actually strong evidence that these guys were buried alive. So if you bury a live clam in shallow sediments, he can usually escape. But if he's buried quickly and really deeply in heavy sediments with a lot of sand and pressure, he's going to die, and under the right conditions will turn into a fossil. So what can explain the many millions of tightly sealed clam fossils that we find all over the world? Well, the most sensible explanation is that these guys were buried quickly and deeply during a massive catastrophic event, like the flood that the Bible describes. And these fossil clams that are now just rocks, they're powerful evidence of a devastating flood that covered the entire earth, leaving behind many obvious clues. This is just one more important piece of evidence that the Word of God is true and can be trusted from the beginning to the end. After the break, does the Bible align with what soil science reveals about Earth's earliest days? Dr. Glenn Wilson will join us in studio to explore the intersection of hydrology and creation, so don't go anywhere. The birds of the air, they were created by God in the beginning, but they are so diverse right now. He is being handed this magnificent creature.
This bird is designed. He is chock full of design. This doesn't just happen. He'll fly over your head and he'll land and you can't hear a thing.
Is that right?
It's incredible. God thought of everything when he made them.
On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Limestone, we see it all around the world, but what is it exactly and how did it get here?
But let's delve a little bit into limestone. This was found by our good friend John Mackay, our mutual friend John Mackay, a few years back, right? He was driving through the Peak District and he shouted, "Stop!" And he said, "I've seen limestone." And the driver was like, "We're in the middle of the Peak District, it's all limestone around here." No, I found some special limestone.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. Genesis 1 tells us that on day 3 of creation, God said, "Let the dry land appear." And just like that, Scripture says dry land appeared, and it was good. Now, most of us have probably read right past that without much thought. I mean, dry land, that sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? God separated the water, and now here's ground to walk on. But if you ask a soil physicist, the word dry might not mean what you think it means. Today we are joined in studio by Dr. Glenn Wilson, who holds a PhD in soil physics and spent his career as a USDA research hydrologist. In his article titled, "Is Dry Land Really Dry?" he explores what the term dry land really means, biblically and scientifically, and what that tells us about the original earth that God created. Dr. Wilson, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
It is great to have you in studio. A few months back, we were hiking in through East Tennessee in the most remote conditions that you could imagine.
Yes, up a waterfall, essentially.
Exactly.
And not a real clean one at that.
Slipping and sliding.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with the big question in this article that was published in Creation Matters. I'm a lifetime member of the Creation Research Society. Of course, gotten these for years. Talk about dry land. What does it mean?
Well, let's back up and look at day 1 and day 2.
Yeah.
You know, first it was formless and void, which is a perfect description of water, which will take on any shape of whatever its pressures are being exerted on it. In day 2, he separated the waters from the waters, right? Yeah. So the question is, was it created? Was this dry land created on day 3?
Okay.
The scripture says that it appeared. Right? Yeah. And that description is the same description as when they were preparing to come off of the ark. They had been on this flooded land for over a year, right? And then it describes the mountains appeared. They became visible. So was it created on day 3? Was this dry land created on day 3? Or was it there all the time under the water? I think we can learn a lot by looking at that description of dry land.
Absolutely. Okay.
So as a soil physicist, I can tell you that it's never dry. The soil, we can't even define exactly what is dry in soil. And just as a good example, so one of the first things that I did as a soil scientist was to do what we call water retention curves.
Yeah.
The ability of the soil to retain water. Okay? So you take an undisturbed core of soil and you saturate it from the bottom up to remove all air. Then we're going to put it in a chamber, lock it into a chamber, and exert pressures, pneumatic pressures to it, which is essentially the same as a plant extracting water out of it, sucking water out of it. We're putting an air pressure. Now, these are pretty intense chambers. They can go up to 300 psi.
Yeah.
And so right away, if you've got soil that's completely saturated, 1 or 2 days of drainage, the really large pores may drain out. But the rest of it's going to hold water. It's just as if I stick this in there, you may get a drip, but you still have water being held there.
I got you.
Okay?
That's retained.
That's retained. Well, the soil is just, it's a three-phase media. You've got these pore spaces that can be very, very microscopic pores.
Okay.
The smaller the pore, the stronger it can hold by those same surface tension forces.
In other words, soil is going to have some type of a moisture.
Yes. So even when we exert it to pressures up to 15,000 centimeters of water pressure, I mean, that's the equivalent of diving, scuba diving down to 500 feet. That's going to be under a lot of pressure. You've still got water in it. Now, it'll get to the point that it's past the wilting point. The plants can no longer extract it. But even at that point, when it's that dry that plants would wilt and die, it's still going to have 10 to 15% moisture in it.
Is that right?
If you take the soil out and you just lay it out and let it dry by the air, it's going to dry some more. Still going to have 3 to 5% moisture in it. It's never fully dry. Even if you take it and put it in the oven, you will still have in the minerals, you'll still have structural water in the minerals.
Okay, so how does this apply? Why does this matter when it comes to the biblical account of creation?
There's some very important implications of this. So if you go back and look at the original Hebrew word, the Hebrew word for dry land is yabusha.
Okay.
Yabusha just means dry land. That is the same word that was used when Moses crossed the Red Sea. God departed the water. So this Red Sea was completely oversaturated, and God parted it, and it describes that they walked across
on dry land.
Dry land. It's the same word used when the priests held the ark and Joshua led them across the Jordan. It's the same word. Well, clearly it's not dry. So the implications are this: if you're justifying that the land was created on day 3 because it says it was dry,
right?
That's a misnomer.
Okay.
It's water that in each of these descriptions was covering land. So if the land was under the water all this time, what would it be like? So that water on day 2 was before there was a moon, right?
Absolutely.
So you don't have any tidal forces. It was before the sun, and so you wouldn't have the differential heating of it causing wind, so you would be under very calm waters. Well, if you take a jug and have sediment in it and shake it up and then just let it go calm, it's going to settle out into very level land. Now, that's not the land that we see out here.
No.
Because that was created by the flood.
Okay.
The original earth was completely destroyed, right?
Absolutely. So when we look at the topography today, we see mountains, we see valleys, we see
waterfalls,
erosional marks, we see waterfalls.
Yes.
But the original land that was created in the beginning, when in Genesis it says, "Let the dry land appear."
Yes.
That probably looked vastly different from what we see today.
Because that original world was destroyed.
Okay.
That's what 2 Peter 3 says. It was destroyed. So what we see today is nothing like what it was then. And you remember, God said that it was very good. So what would a very good land look to God? I think it would be much different than the way we see things.
Yeah.
We see things today and we see the waterfalls and say, oh, they're beautiful. We see the mountains and they're picturesque.
Yeah.
But yet he told all the animals to multiply and fill the earth.
Yeah.
And he told them all to only eat plants. So don't you think he would have to then create it in a such that it could produce for all these animals?
Because again, you've got these rocky areas that can't grow plants today. You have deserts that can't grow plants today.
And what did Jesus say about that in the parable?
Yes.
He talked about, well, plants aren't going to produce in rocky places.
Okay.
They're not going to produce on the side of the roads where it's compacted.
So to
takes
multiply
good soil
and fill the earth, it implies that there was good soil from the beginning.
Yes. And if you've got, mountains and hills with the sun, you're going to get differential heating, which is going to cause wind. You're going to get wind erosion, and that's going to cause rainfall.
Okay.
Because particulate matter up in the atmosphere, it's going to condense around it. You get rainfall, you've got erosion. Erosion is never a good thing. I spent my last 20 years studying erosion, and it's a destructive process. It's a process of death. And God said it was very good.
Everything was very good.
Yeah.
Now, on day 3, we've got the beginning of the formation of vegetation.
Yes.
Let green things appear, and boom, there was this rapid maturing of these plants and trees and grasses.
We'll talk about that, another time. I'd like to talk with you about, go through some of the physics of that, because one of the things that I did a lot of research on in my career was solute transport.
Okay.
Also, absorption, desorption of chemicals and nutrients. And then they have to go through transformations and such, So that's something, we can talk about in another day. But I think, what are the implications of this land then being fairly, pretty much level?
Okay.
You remember Adam and Eve, they were naked. Yeah. They weren't just unashamed. They weren't freezing. They weren't burning up. They were in an ideal temperature, which you get from a fairly level, normal, topography. Yeah. So there's hydrologic implications of this. Where did that water go to? Well, I think that water then went into that land.
Okay.
So how does Genesis 2 describe how the plants were watered? It said a mist rose
up from the ground and watered the face of the earth.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect description of a land that's got a very shallow water table.
Okay.
Right?
So everything is pointing to no massive mountains and valleys before the flood.
Yes.
Does this help explain how during the flood, when water covered the entire face of the earth, it doesn't take a lot of water to cover the entire face of the earth if the surface area of the pre-flood continents were flat?
Yes, that's right. And you had enough water before to cover the earth, and now it's down below. So when he breaks up, he said he broke up the fountains of the deep. So there was tremendous water resources underneath.
Interesting.
Ready to be made into fountains to break it up.
So everything was prepared from the beginning, but with a fairly level pre-flood continental configuration. It would have affected the tides, it would have affected the temperatures, it would have affected the winds
climate.
And climate change.
It would have been a perfect environment for the mists to rise every day.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's very fascinating. Okay, so again, your specialty, looking at soil physics, you've been able to try to track this back down and show how it connects back to a biblical interpretation. In your latest piece in Creation Matters, Is Dry Land Really Dry? I would encourage everybody to go check it out and learn more.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilson, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us.
All right, glad to be here.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for joining us. This has been an eye-opening look at something that we've read 1,000 times, probably never questioned. Dry land. It might not mean dust and drought. It might mean something carefully crafted by a creator to support life from the very start. It's just another reminder that Scripture, it holds up under scrutiny, not just theologically, but scientifically. And when we start asking good questions, well, that's when we find the answers. Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. We're back, and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first viewer voices submission tonight comes from Mark on Facebook. He says, "I've been reading your website and emails for about a year and just received my first magazine from this ministry. All are done with clarity and display the glory of our Creator." Thank you for that comment, Mark. Our emails, all of our updates, all of our social media, and everything that we do, even these broadcasts, are all designed to give glory to the Creator for what He has done. But they're in such a way that you can actually share this with all of your friends, with all of your neighbors, with your family, even with skeptics because of the science. We hear from atheists and agnostics who call in and they're like, "Well, you know what? It's kind of hard to argue because you're actually using real scientific principles." Yes, but all real scientific principles are pointing right back to the truth of God's Word. So thank you again for staying up to date with what we're doing here at the ministry. Now, our second testimonial comes from Trevor, who had this to say after visiting the Wonders Center and Science Museum. "Wonderful. I had my 6-year-old son and 13-year-old daughter. We all had plenty to keep us entertained from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We all loved it for different reasons. They are continuing to expand, and it looks like there is space to have events, parties, or even conventions. Fantastic." Thank you so much, Trevor. Yes, we have continued to expand at an increasing rate month after month after month with new exhibit halls, new displays, and you are right, we're doing conferences, we are doing concerts, we're having special events, kids' days, homeschool days, all sorts of things. So go to wonderscenter.org. Make sure that you are subscribed to our email updates to stay informed about all of what we are doing here in Dixon, Tennessee. Now, if you've been impacted by the work that this ministry is doing, I want to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email comments at genesissciencenetwork.com. Now it's time to shift our focus to a historic moment in space travel. On this week's Genesis Science Minute, we're going to hear what some of the first Apollo astronauts chose to read aloud as they circled the moon. Let's take a look right now.
Many scientific institutions present an atheistic view of our universe as scientific fact. Even so, a significant percentage of the population does not actually believe that. Not so long ago, in 1968, Apollo 8 was the first manned mission to orbit the moon. The monumental speech given by the astronauts began like this: We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Today, while some question the very existence of God, we must remember that most of the greatest scientists that ever lived believed in a creator. According to the book of Genesis, God formed everything, including mankind, in the beginning, and behold, it was very good. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. davidrives.com.
You know, it's not just some of the greatest scientists that ever lived. I'm talking about also some of the greatest scientists to this day. NASA astronauts that we've had on the program, all sorts of friends, colleagues, PhD scholars. They all realize everything is pointing to God's design. Now it's time to jump into this week's Ministry Report. Now, one of our recent Unwrapped events featured a familiar face. Helmut Welk returned to the Wonder Center with a powerful presentation on creation and astronomy. Helmut is a returning guest here at the museum, and in this talk he tackled one of the biggest topics out there. Yeah, it's pretty expansive. Cosmology, space, and how our understanding of the universe aligns with the biblical account of creation. He walked us through Genesis 1 with a fresh perspective, focusing on what God really did during those 6 days of creation, including insights into light, into matter, and even the laws of physics. In this clip, he explains why modern theories like the gap theory and the day-age theory, they fall short of Scripture, and how the plain reading of Genesis is both theologically sound and scientifically consistent. Watch this short clip from the event.
But the gap theory basically says there's a gap between verse 1, the one we just read, and verse 2 in the rest of the first chapter of Genesis. This has been around a while. In fact, it was made popular by a notable Scottish theologian named Thomas Chalmers back in the early 1800s. And he was really pushed this theory, and I continue to hear people today saying, well, this must be how the universe could be billions of years old, and we can squeeze those billions of years between verse 1 and verse 2, the big gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Now, they fit in a lot of stuff here, including Lucifer's rebellion. There was another flood, Lucifer's flood. That's where the fossils came from. There was an ice age. They put a whole lot of stuff in there that the Hebrew does not allow. A whole lot of stuff just to try to explain it. The Hebrew text, in fact, does not allow for a gap between verse 1 and 2, because it goes from that opening statement, and. Each day begins with and, like it's jumping right into the next topic.
What a powerful reminder that we don't have to compromise the Word of God to explain the universe around us. Science, when it is properly understood, points us right back to the Creator, not away from Him. Now, if you'd like to see the full Unwrapped event with Helmut, head over to creationsuperstore.com. It's available to watch right now. It's available for digital download. It's available in many formats. And remember, Unwrapped airs every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time on Genesis Science Network, genessisciencenetwork.com, featuring some of today's top experts in creation science and biblical truth. And also, maybe you can make it out to Tennessee to catch one in audience as we broadcast live from the Wonder Center and Science Museum. Maybe you'll be a part. The prayers and generosity of our viewers continues to make all of this possible. And your monthly support, it helps ensure that we can continue to share the wonders of God's creation with people all over the globe. So I invite you to partner with us in ministry by making a tax-deductible contribution. Your donations make a difference every single day. It helps keep all of this content 100% free to the public. You can visit our website or call 931-212-7990 to donate and learn more about our work. Next, we examine how one man's ideas became untouchable in academia. On this week's Heavens Declare, we ask, has Darwin become more than a scientist? Well, let's take a look right now. visiting a Buddhist temple, you get a sampling of religions that hold man in high esteem. They idolize the teachings of Gautama Buddha. They study him and attempt to attain to his level of perfection. A lot of people look at the jolly Buddhai that adorns American curio shops as almost like this god. But the thing is, I could point to similarities of this, how do I call it, person worshiping, in many religions. Charles Darwin is no exception. This man whose only credential was in theology is celebrated by the scientific community as a saint, an icon. He's set on this pedestal, almost worshipped. His reach was significant, and the ideas that he published have had global circulation because universities only peddle one official religion: Darwinism. A quick search will reveal that the number of works published each year on the topic of Christianity are almost matched by those on the topic of evolution. Now, wait a second, you might be saying. Christianity is a religion, while evolution is simply studying science. So of course you're going to find a lot of people studying science. But the truth is, both claim to have the keys to understanding life and death. And while they both give distinctly different answers about our origins, they both also claim things about our future as well. You see, the Bible claims that life is the result of an eternal being. In other words, all life on earth comes from life everlasting. Now, this is consistent with scientific study that shows that life doesn't come from non-living matter. The Bible claims that death comes from our disobedience to our Creator and our sinful nature. It claims that the universe is designed, and therefore laws, physics, and nature and life should operate consistently to those inherent design principles. Now, Darwinian evolution claims that life evolved from simple to complex, and it implies that the first life forms must have come from something that was non-living, which defies all scientific observation. But Charles Darwin isn't to be questioned. You dare not mock this saint or risk the ridicule that it will bring. I mean, why would critical thought be condemned in an institution engaged in the unbiased study for truth? But telling a biologist that you aren't convinced or that Darwin's conclusions seemed illogical is akin to blasphemy within the sacred halls of our colleges and universities, the churches of Darwinism. The religion of naturalism is forced without alternative as one by one people line up to pay homage and worship at the feet of this icon, Charles Darwin. Is this science? Or is it a religious practice of worshiping a racist, misogynistic man and his antiquated 19th century ideas? I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. You know, these are one of those things where you have to realize that we have had this agenda pushed on us for so many years that people say, well, it must be true. But this was an antiquated belief system from a man who really didn't know what he was talking about. It's time we move on to real science. Now, coming up, in a universe that is so extremely vast, do we really matter? Science journalist David Coppage joins us to tackle the big question. How can a God who made billions and billions of galaxies still care deeply for you? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists, and on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Welcome back to the report. If you've ever looked up at the night sky and felt incredibly small, you're not alone. It's something both skeptics and Christians wrestle with. How could we possibly matter in a universe that's so unimaginably vast? We're talking about billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, and here we are, tiny humans, on a supposedly pale blue dot. Some would say that we're just cosmic accidents, insignificant specks in an uncaring cosmos. But the Bible offers a radically different perspective. Psalm 8 asked, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" And then it answers that question. We're crowned with glory and honor by our Creator. So joining us from Santa Clarita, California is David Coppage, a friend of mine. David has been a science journalist in Southern California for almost 25 years. He's a board member of Illustra Media. They do great documentary work, and he also serves as their science consultant. He worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for 14 years. David has a bachelor in astrophysics and has led over 40 star parties from 1984 to 2024. David, welcome back to the report.
Good to be back with you, David.
It is great to have you. You also do a good bit of photography as well, don't you?
Oh, yes. I love flying my drone and traveling out to the Southwest and looking for interesting things.
There's a lot of rocks to photograph out there. It's just beautiful. David, one of the biggest challenges that Christians face today is reconciling the vastness of space with our personal significance. You've actually contributed on books about this topic and many articles about this topic. Why do so many people, especially skeptics, stumble over the idea that God could care about us in a universe that is this big?
Well, this is a very important question, and it hit me early on. I remember going to a planetarium show as a teenager, and they took us on a tour through the vastness of the universe, and it blew me away, and it really influenced my thinking from then on. In fact, I took a multimedia program to churches and camps and schools for about 22 years, from the late 70s into 2000 or so. This was with slide projectors, which was state-of-the-art back at the time. This was before PowerPoint. Where I took people on a tour of the universe, first to the moon and then to all the planets, then to the nearest star, which was 4 light years away, and then from there to other stars, to the galaxy and other galaxies. And it's very easy to convince people that we are tiny, insignificant specks in a vast universe. And this creates a problem for a lot of people. I think it's a stumbling block to faith. I had a friend in my adult Bible class who is a mature Christian, but he said, when I look up at the stars at night, it shakes my faith. You know, how can we believe that in the midst of all this vastness that we matter at all in any sense on the cosmic scale? So I've thought about this question a lot, and I've come up with some ideas that I'd like to share that may be encouraging to our listeners.
Absolutely. And of course, we've had NASA astronauts on the program before who they say, well, when I go up into space and look down at Earth, that's what strengthens my faith, because I realize that I am in the midst of this inhospitable world, and then I'm staring down at the perfect spot spacecraft Earth, that is designed for our habitation. So David, yeah, please share some of those ideas with us.
Well, to start with, I think it's important to realize that the Bible taught the vastness of space from the beginning. In fact, God, when he spoke to Abraham, he compared the sand on the seashore to the stars in heaven. And so, you know, that's a pretty good comparison we know now. It's not like the ancient astronomers of pagan countries that thought there were just a few thousand stars. So the vastness of space comes baked into the biblical cosmology from the beginning. Jeremiah said, the host of heaven cannot be numbered. And yet the Bible does treat man as highly significant and exceptional in the universe in spite of that, in spite of that doctrine. And you read Psalm 8 there. So let's get into this a little bit and think about, wouldn't it be interesting if modern science can actually reinforce the biblical view of our importance to God and maybe challenge the atheist materialist viewpoint? I remember, and this question matters to everybody, believers and unbelievers. I remember hearing Bill Nye, the science guy, you know, talking about how I'm a speck on another speck, orbiting a speck, in the middle of a speck, in the middle of specklessness. You know? So he was trying to make the point that we are so unimportant on the cosmic scale. So how do we reconcile with the Bible treating man as the crown of creation and of high importance in God's eyes? Well, let's say that, okay, let's make people bigger, as big as stars, okay? So the problem there is that we'd have to stay vast distances from each other to avoid, our gravity would make us collide into each other. So if you imagine Mr. and Mrs. Star wanting to come together, they would, the two would become one very quickly and probably go supernova before long. So we can't be that big. And even if we were, God could make the universe correspondingly larger and we'd have the same problem. And so the problem we have is one of relative size. But the point I would like to make is that we have to be the size we are to be able to exist as creatures capable of love and fellowship and fulfilling God's purpose for us. We can't be as big as stars or galaxies, and we couldn't fulfill it if we were smaller too. So we are just at the Goldilocks size to be able to fulfill God's purpose for us.
Well, that's exciting. Again, we're somewhere between atoms and galaxies in the scale, but that seems to be an important sweet spot for diversity, for fellowship, for everything that we encounter as humanity. And there's a good reason that we're the size that we are. I love how you put that. But you also point out that we live on a very specific type of a planet around a very specific, we're a main sequence G2 type star, but that's not the most common within our galaxy or within our universe. So how finely tuned is our place in the cosmos for supporting life?
Yes, starting about the rise of quantum mechanics, scientists began realizing that the constants of physics and the laws of physics are very finely tuned for our existence. And they called this the anthropic principle, you're probably familiar with. In other words, if we didn't have a finely tuned universe, we wouldn't be here talking about it. And it turns out that the fine-tuning is extreme for everything, including the constant of gravity, the size of the electron, the ratio of the proton to the electron, the charges of these subatomic particles are all finely tuned for our existence. So we have to be on the right type of planet, orbiting the right type of star, and the right type of galaxy. In other words, between two spiral arms, we have a good view of the universe, but you wouldn't want to be at the center because it's dangerous there. There's too much radiation there. So we are at the perfect spot to fulfill our role. Now, we can look at the size scale of things called the orders of magnitude scale, and we're about at the 1 meter scale or so. I don't know, you might be pushing 2 meters yourself there, David, but let's say 1 meter. And then if you go up to 10 meters, that's 1 order of magnitude, 100, that's 2. And if you go up to 21, 10 to the 21, that's about the size of spiral galaxies.
Wow.
So yeah, we're much smaller than spiral galaxies. But the point is you can go down too, and this is a modern science thing. Early scientists did not know anything about cells or atoms. We didn't know about bacteria until Leeuwenhoek discovered them with his homemade microscope. So you can go down the scale, and if you go to 10 to the minus 21 orders of magnitude, you get down to the realm of subatomic particles and quarks. So it's rather interesting that here we are right in the middle of this scale of orders of magnitude. And we can even fine-tune this farther by saying that you can't go very far out of our scale, the meter scale, to be able to fulfill God's purposes. In other words, if we were as large as sauropod dinosaurs or as small as ants, it wouldn't work for us to be able to experience love and fellowship, communication, and fulfill his ministry and be able to travel as easily as we do and use technology. So we are right at a sweet spot on the order of magnitude scale that I think is quite interesting.
That is absolutely fascinating, and it ties directly into your work with Illustra Media over the years, your presentation, How Big is God? I love that concept because when we think about how big God is, that he could create this entire universe and yet care about us, little us here on this planet, it resonates with people in such a way that we realize that, yes, he loves us. Even though the universe was formed to declare his glory, the heavens declare the glory of God, Psalm 19, the earth was formed for habitation, which is Isaiah 45, and it all fits together. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, and good to be with you again.
Absolutely. We have a lot of people who tell us that we're just star stuff, that we're the result of some random coincidence, a big bang over 14 billion years. But what we've seen is that we are very special. So it's just exciting to be reminded that God's greatness doesn't diminish our value. God's greatness, the immensity of the cosmos, is actually pointing us to how much he loves us. The same God who stretches out the heavens also knows the number of hairs on our heads, and that's not a contradiction. It's a testimony to his power and personal care. And if you're watching today and you're wrestling with your place in the cosmos, let this encourage you. The Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God. You're not lost in the universe. You are known by the one who made it. I would love for you to check out David Coppedge's article, How Big is God? And also the book that he co-authored, Spacecraft Earth, A Guide for Passengers. Both are powerful ways of showing God's love for us. And that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. Until next week, keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.